The most dangerous sound in human history wasn't an explosion. It was a siren. Inside a concrete bunker, 50 miles outside of Moscow. It is September 26, 1983. The world is asleep, but Stanislav Petrov is wide awake. He is standing in the middle of a room filled with cigarette smoke and sweating men. He is staring at a screen that says one word in bright red letters. Start. The machine is telling him that 5 nuclear missiles have just launched from the United States. They are flying toward his country at 3 times the speed of sound. He has a phone in his hand. If he lifts it and speaks the confirmation code, he ends civilization. If he doesn't, and the missiles are real, his own family dies in 20 minutes. He held the fate of 8 billion people in his shaking hand. This is the story of the man who chose to do nothing. To understand why Petrov's hands were shaking, you have to understand the silence before the scream. 1983 was not a normal year. It was the year the Cold War turned freezing. 3 weeks earlier, the Soviet Union had shot down a Korean civilian airliner, Flight 007, killing everyone on board. Paranoia was the currency of the day. The KGB was convinced that the Americans were preparing a surprise nuclear first strike. Enter Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov. Petrov wasn't a politician. He wasn't a zealot. He was an engineer, a man of math. He didn't trust feelings. He trusted data. He was the duty officer at Serpukhov 15, the secret heart of the Soviet early warning system. His job was terrifyingly simple. Above the Earth, a network of satellites called Oko, the Eye, watched the American missile fields. If a missile launched, the satellite would see the heat signature. The computer would calculate the trajectory. The siren would blare. And Petrov was the human link in the chain. His orders were clear. He was not paid to think. He was paid to report. If the computer says launch, he relays the message to the Kremlin, and the Kremlin presses the button. It was a system built on a single, terrifying assumption, that the machine never lies. At 12:14 a.m., the siren tore through the room. The main screen lit up red. The computer reported a single missile launch from the United States. The room erupted. Operators were shouting. Chairs were scraping against the floor. Petrov froze. The protocol was absolute. Confirm the launch. But something whispered in the back of his mind. A human doubt that no algorithm could account for. Why only one? Petrov was an analyst. He knew the American doctrine. If the Americans were going to start World War III, they wouldn't send a single missile. They would send hundreds. They would try to wipe out the Soviet response in one massive, blinding strike. One missile isn't an attack. It's a mistake. He stood up. He shouted at his men to return to their stations. "False alarm!" he barked. He didn't know it was false. He was guessing. He sat back down, wiping sweat from his forehead. The siren stopped. He thought it was over. But then, the siren screamed again. Launch 2, launch 3. 2 missiles, 3, 4, 5. The computer was now screaming that an entire volley was inbound. The probability of error dropped to 0. The high reliability light turned on. The system was shouting at him. "This is real. You are dying." Petrov's legs felt like lead. He felt physically sick. 5 missiles is still strange, but it's not one. Is this a limited strike? A test? Or is this the end of history? He looked at the men around him. Young soldiers, terrified. They were looking at him like he was God, waiting for the order to fire back. Petrov reached for the phone to the Kremlin. The line was open. All he had to say was yes. But he refused to outsource his judgment to the screen. He relied on his intuition. He knew the satellite system was new. He knew it was rushed. And he knew, in his gut, that the end of the world shouldn't feel like a computer glitch. If he was wrong, the missiles would hit Moscow in roughly 20 minutes. He lifted the receiver. He spoke to the duty general at headquarters. He kept his voice steady, though his hand was trembling. The system is giving false information. He lied. He didn't know it was false. He had no proof, just a feeling. He was gambling with millions of lives. Then he waited. It was the longest wait in the history of mankind. 2 minutes passed. If the missiles were real, the ground radar would pick them up any second now. 10 minutes. Silence. 15 minutes. The men in the bunker stopped breathing. They were waiting for the flash. They were waiting to be vaporized. 23 minutes. Nothing. The radar remained clear. The horizon remained dark. The sun didn't rise in the middle of the night. It was a false alarm. Months later, they found the cause. It wasn't a spy. It wasn't a hack. The sun had reflected off high-altitude clouds in North Dakota, hitting the satellite lens at a specific angle that looked exactly like the heat of a missile exhaust. A reflection of sunlight. That is what almost killed us all. Stanislav Petrov was not given a medal. He was reprimanded. Why? Because he didn't fill out the logbook correctly during the crisis. And because acknowledging his heroism meant acknowledging the Soviet system was broken. He was sidelined. Early retirement. He suffered a nervous breakdown. He died in a small apartment, largely unknown, living on a meager pension. But he left us a legacy far greater than wealth. In an age where we let algorithms decide what we watch, who we date, and how we think, Petrov reminds us of the ultimate human power. The power to pause. The power to say no. The power to trust your gut when the whole world is screaming at you to panic. He didn't save the world by fighting. He saved it by doing absolutely nothing.